Tonight, Lagos State High Court sentences to death by hanging suspended Assistant Superintendent of Police Drambi Vandy for the murder of Lagos-based lawyer Mrs. Omobolanle Rahim in December 2022. Group CEO of NNPC Limited, Mele Kyari, optimistic of Nigeria becoming net exporter of petroleum products next year, insists that no subsidy is being paid on petrol. Of the federal government to compel airline operators to start paying compensation to passengers for flight delay or cancellations not attributed to natural occurrences.
On business news tonight, oil prices jumped more than 4% as Israel-Hamas conflict enters a third day following weekend deadly surprise attack by the Palestinian militant group.
On sports news tonight, 11-year-old Deborah Ibimopo-Ere becomes the youngest national chess champion ever after emerging the winner in the women's category at the 2023 Nigeria National Chess Championship in Lagos.
From Abuja, the nation's capital, the Vice President Kashim Shettima meets more stakeholders in Kogi State, urges the people to support the federal government and vote for the APC in the November 11 governorship election.
And in international news from London, Israel's defense minister has ordered a complete siege of the Gaza Strip, including the cutting off of food, fuel, electricity and water supplies.
We begin tonight with justice served. It was a life cut short on Christmas Day by a police officer. But today, a Lagos State High Court sitting in Tafawa Balewa Square Annex, Igboshiri, has convicted and sentenced to death by hanging the suspended Assistant Superintendent of Police Drambi Vandy for the murder of Lagos lawyer Mrs. Omobolanle Rahim. In handing down the sentence, Justice Ibironke Harrison held that the prosecution proved its case against the convict beyond all reasonable doubt. The Lagos State government had on January the 16th, 2023, arraigned Mr. Vandy before the court for shooting to death the 41-year-old pregnant lawyer at the Aja Underbridge checkpoint on December the 25th, 2022. The convict faced a one-count charge of murder contrary to Section 223 of the Criminal Law of Lagos 2015. All the counsels to both parties have been speaking on the court's judgment.
The suspended ASP Drambi Vandy was arraigned before the court on January 16, 2023, 3 weeks after he allegedly shot to death a 41-year-old pregnant lawyer, Bolanle Rahim. He faced a one-count charge of murder, contrary to Section 223 of the Criminal Law of Lagos State 2015. The prosecution, the Lagos State government, called a total of 11 witnesses in proof of its case against the defendant. The witnesses include the husband and sister of the deceased, police officers who were at the scene of the incident, and those who investigated the alleged offense, the armorer, and even the ballistician. The defendant testified as the sole witness in his own defense. In denying the offense, the defendant told the court that the loud gunshot purportedly heard by eyewitnesses was that of a firecracker. Vandy also claimed that the bullet which killed the late Bolanle Rahim did not come from the rifle he carried on the day of the incident. In fact, he claimed that he had never seen the bullet until it was tendered in court. But Justice Ibironke Harrison held that he did not give any explanation of how the firecracker killed the deceased. Neither did he give any other explanation for her death. The court also said that it believed the evidence of the pathologist that the late Bolanle was shot from the right side at close range, and when combined with the evidence of the ballistician, yielded surplus information leading to the conclusion that the defendant was the only armed person who had the opportunity to shoot from the right side, and which shot resulted in her death. The court also took into account the testimony of the family members who immediately ran towards the defendant, and especially the clear evidence of the late Bolanle's sister, who had immediately gone to hold the defendant by the shirt and identified him as the shooter, as well as the statements of eyewitnesses who pointed at the defendant and labeled him the shooter. In the final analysis, the court found it strange that the defendant made no attempt to contact his colleagues after the incident, but instead fled and proceeded to hide inside a minibus until he was dragged out. The court found the defendant guilty and sentenced him to death by hanging.
We hope it will bring a closure for the family of late Mrs. Bola Rahim, and we thank the government headed by Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu. This is not the final stage. It's just like a football competition. There's the primaries, there's the quarterfinal, there's the semi, and there's the final.
We believe that this is a step to cushion the effects on the family members, because at the end of the day, it cannot replace a loved one, but it is a step in the right direction.
The leadership of the Nigerian Bar Association also applauded the judgment and used the opportunity to draw attention to other pending cases.
The president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Yakubu Chinuko SAN, had mentioned the fact that the NBA was going to follow this matter till the end. That is exactly what we have done.
Justice has been done. We're also calling on the Ministry of Justice to consider the Gafaru's case to ensure that justice is done.
Just as he restated his commitment to getting justice for Gafaru Braimo, who was also allegedly shot dead by an officer from the same police station as Vambi Drambi, the NBA says it will monitor any appeal on Drambi's judgment. Shola Shoyeli, Channels Television News.
Hussein, the courts, the coroner's inquest into the circumstances surrounding the cause of death of a 12-year-old student of Darwin College, Lekki, today listened to the testimony of the deceased mom, Mrs. Rosemary Oromoni. Mrs. Oromoni, who appeared in court visibly shaken, rained curses on her son's killers and broke down at intervals while giving her evidence. In her testimony, she started by saying that she received a message from the school that her son, Sylvester Oromoni Jr., was injured while playing football with some of his colleagues. She said that when he was brought back home in Delta State, she noticed that his lips were scaly and he had a swollen hip. He was subsequently treated for malaria for 3 days at home, but the boy was still in pains. She also testified that her son eventually confessed to her that he was beaten up by 5 other students, but gave her the names of 3. She also said that the students gave him a substance to drink. Following his persistent poor health, the family doctor had asked the family to take him to the laboratory for a scan and x-ray, but she said she could not recall the result because at that moment she was heartbroken. She said that on November the 30th, 2021, when her son died, his condition had worsened, and as such he was rushed to the family's hospital, but she was not allowed to accompany him. Following his death, the Lagos State government shut the school, and a coroner's inquest to investigate the circumstances of his death began in January last year.
Honorable Coroner has invited counsel representing all the sides to put in their written opinions, what you might call submit our written addresses, so that by the 20th of November, they will be formally adopted. So we're having the adoption of written addresses on the 20th of November. We've been here now for
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years, you know. In fact, 21st, the second anniversary of the unfortunate death of the boy, you know, it's 21st of 30th of November, almost 2 years, you know. So, but the coroner has assured us that he will give his verdict before the end of the year.
Away from the courts, as part of the gains of the deregulation of the downstream sector, Nigeria is set to become a net exporter of petroleum products by 2024, and that's according to the NNPCL. The company's group chief executive, Mr. Mele Kyari, stated this at the second edition of the Energy and Labour Summit organized by Pengasen. However, the president of the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association, Mr. Festus Osifo, laments the economic impact of subsidy removal.
CEO NNPC Limited.
It's the second edition of the Energy and Labour Summit organized by the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengasen.
One more time.
The keynote speaker is the Group Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Mr. Mele Kyari. He opens the conversation by dwelling on the gains of the Petroleum Industry Act.
There are today over close to 25 licenses to create refineries. Build and operate refineries. Nobody could take the next step because as long as you do not have certainty around pricing and who is going to pay for that difference, no one will put his money.
This opens the door to the conversations that followed, especially on the removal of fuel subsidy.
We had inadequate supply and dubious distribution of petroleum products, corruption, monopolistic practices, misappropriation, bunkering, trafficking of refined products to other countries.
As we stand at the crossroads of energy transition and calls for greener sources of energy, it is imperative that we come together to chart a new course in view of the fact that the deregulation of the petroleum industry and promotion of gas utilization are not merely policy changes.
However, the labor unions have suggestions on how to cushion the impacts of subsidy removal.
Recent policy direction by the government has placed untold hardship on Nigerians, chief of which is the PMS subsidy removal and the floating of the naira-dollar exchange rate. The overwhelming impact of these on Nigerians can only be imagined rather than experienced. Part of the decisions of floating has only benefited the government and oil and gas companies in Nigeria.
The organized labor in Nigeria is less than 10% of generality of Nigerians who are working. So we need to also factor in the other Nigerians and their benefit. The way they can benefit, it has to do with transportation. Then the second aspect is that we also need to look at the other parts of life, what I would call the soft aspect of it, healthcare, education.
The ideas and strategies developed at this annual summit is expected to be shared with players in the industry to address the critical issues in the nation's oil and gas sector.
Meanwhile, the Group Managing Director of the NNPCL, Mr. Mele Kyari, says that contrary to recent reports, no subsidy is being paid for petrol. He stated this in an interview with State House correspondents shortly after meeting with President Bola Tinubu at the presidential villa Abuja, where he says there is currently a supply of 1.4 billion litres of petrol in the country. Mr. Kyari also spoke on the emergence of queues at some filling stations.
We have seen very few states, pockets of very low queues, not only connected with the road situation that we are seeing. There are a number of blockages on our road, crossing products from the southern depots into the northern part of the country, and it takes a much longer time than they do now. They have to reroute the trucks around many, many locations for them to be able to reach, and that created delays, and that created some supply gap that has been filled, and we do not see any of such problems again. And secondly, because of the full deregulation that we have in this sector, marketers are now competing amongst themselves. So one, you must have noticed some fuel stations will reduce price by 2 naira and 3 naira. So customers will naturally run to the places where you have that reduction in prices. And that creates panic because for those who don't know why they are doing it, they will think that there's something wrong happening or there's an ominous sign of scarcity and people start queuing up in the fuel. So otherwise, there's no challenge. Supply is robust. We have over 1.4 billion litres of product in our hands, both marine and land. And also that there are no issues around delivery of those products into the land. So there's no fear, nothing to bother about. But we're also happy that the market forces are now playing out and marketers are competing. And of course, there are a few issues we're engaging them to resolve alongside other agencies of government. And there are critical issues around access to foreign exchange. And as you all know, government is doing so much to ensure supply of FX into the market. We know that these FX markets will stabilize. Current A and E window is around 770. And we know that those inputs that's already happening, the inputs of government today will crystallize. And also they will come to an equilibrium position in the FX market. And this is the dream of this country, so that we'll have a stable FX market, stable product market where the prices of product would also speak to prices of other commodities. And this is already manifesting. And we think this is the economic revolution that this country needs. I told you there is no subsidy whatsoever. We are recovering our full cost from the products that we import. We sell to the market. We understand why the marketers are unable to import. We hope that they do this very quick, and this is some of the intervention government is doing. There's no subsidy.
In part two, after the break, the federal government to compel airline operators to start paying compensation to passengers for flight delay or cancellations which are not attributed to natural occurrences. But that's in a moment. Please stay with us. Well, welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, coming to you live from Channels Television. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Lagos State High Court sentences to death by hanging suspended Assistant Superintendent of Police Drambi Vandy for the murder of Lagos-based lawyer Mrs. Omobolale Rahim in December 2022. The Group CEO of NNPC Limited, Mele Kyari, optimistic of Nigeria becoming net exporter of petroleum products next year, insists no subsidy is being paid on PMS. The federal government to compel airline operators to start paying compensation to passengers for flight delay or cancellations not attributed to natural occurrences. And Israel's defense minister has ordered a complete siege of the Gaza Strip, including the cutting off of food, fuel, electricity, and water supplies. News for air passengers as the federal government says it will soon issue an order compelling airline operators to start paying compensation to passengers for flight delays or cancellations not attributed to natural occurrences. The Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Mr. Festus Keyamo, told airline operators in Abuja to build a stable communication channel to enable passengers to get prior notice before any cancellation.
On delayed flights, I want to speak for Nigerians now, the ordinary Nigerians who complain every day. Delayed flight, cancelled flight. I know you have said all your reasons. You have blamed government. You blamed a few things that we do. But I also want to say that it is not all the time that it is governmental. So don't make and run here. At times when you say they are passing through screening machines and they are waiting for you, are waiting for passengers to pass through screening machines. At times they are finished passing through screening machines. They are waiting in the lounge for 5 hours, airpiece, and you cancel your flight. It is not a screening machine. So I want to appeal. It is not every time bed strikes. It's not every time. So please, you see, after some time, we'll start implementing the provisions of the NCA Act. You know, Nigerians don't know that there's compensation for delay. If it is an act, if it's act of God, you cannot pay. But if it is human fault, NCA Act says you will pay. So for all airline operators, why I have praised you, why I have supported you, I will support Nigerians too. You will pay them all. After some time, I will put my feet on the ground. Pay them. When you delay their flights, you cancel their flights.
Now, for more of the news at 10, let's head over to our Abuja studio where Gloria Mozoke is all geared up. Hello, Gloria.
Thank you, Coyote. Ahead of the November 11 governorship election in Kogi State, the Vice President, Shettima, is urging the people of the state to support the federal government. The Vice President stated this in Lokoja, the state capital, while interacting with the Kogi State's Traditional Council of Chiefs. He noted that Kogi has enormous potential for development and cannot afford to fall into the hands of the opposition.
The helicopter conveying Vice President Shettima to Lokoja, the Kogi State capital, touches down at the Chari Megumeri barracks. He's received by Kogi State government officials led by Governor Yahya Bello, as well as members of the All Progressives Congress. First-class chiefs in the state received the dignitaries at the banquet hall of the government house. This meeting is part of the efforts of the All Progressives Congress in Kogi State to win the November 11 governorship election.
I want to assure you, sir, that you are seeing unity in place. Here are our revered fathers. We have enjoyed a good working relationship with them all this while, and all the citizens of Kogi State are in our support. We want to assure you that this election is going to be smooth, fair, and credible.
While thanking the traditional rulers, party leaders, and other stakeholders, the Vice President urges them to give their unalloyed support to the APC to ensure victory in the forthcoming governorship election.
For the purpose of continuity and consolidation, Kogi cannot afford to fall into hostile hands. Certainly, it will deprive Kogi of its rightful share in the nation. The president had just approved funds for the construction of the Ganaja Road.
The Vice President further unveils the plans of the federal government for the state, including the Ajaokuta Steel Company.
The Ajaokuta plan can be a game changer for the Nigerian nation. It has the capacity to assist us in meeting the 8-point agenda of the federal government with respect to job creation and foreign direct investment. Ajaokuta has the capacity to produce components for CNG buses as part of the federal government's gas master plan to cushion the effects of the subsidy removal.
As the Vice President departs the state, members of the APC in the state are optimistic that they will win the forthcoming election.
The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Mr. Nyesom Wike, has berated the European Union over its report on Nigeria's 2023 presidential election, saying the report did not give the true position of the last election held in the country. Mr. Wike made his dissatisfaction known when the EU ambassador to Nigeria, Mrs. Samuela Isopi, paid him a visit in his office.
I sincerely do not agree with the European Union on their stance on the past election in Nigeria. I do certainly take exceptions of their stand because, you see, we thought there's no need for you to interfere in Nigeria, rather to observe and make a recommendation. And the interference came when there were electoral tribunals going on. It's not acceptable. We thought that, oh, you could have even, in fact, I'm surprised, like in River State. I asked, how many of you were in River State to visit the 6,886 or thereabout number of polling units? Sometimes you send 1 or 2 persons. And I ask you, how do you go? How do you? So if you have seen some infractions in about 20 polling units, is that enough to make a general conclusion? And you said there in River State that they did not allow opposition to campaign, which is totally not correct. Because if you saw, there was a law, and you always run away from these facts. You see, our laws cannot be a replica or the same thing with your own laws. To my office.
EU ambassador, on her part, clarified that their goal was not to delegitimize the outcome of the election, but to observe and make recommendations on the process, which she says they did in their report.
The objective is really to assess the process against international agreements, international treaties signed and ratified by Nigeria, but also against Nigerian law. In no way the purpose is to say whether the elections are legitimate or not, because that's not the purpose. And the purpose, as you said, is actually to analyze the process and offer recommendations. And this is what actually the mission did. They offered, if I'm not mistaken, it's 26 recommendations. That's the part of the report that I know best for a very simple reason, because now I have the task, together with my team, to work with our Nigerian partners to see to what extent we can provide the technical assistance, expertise, to address those issues on which I think we can all agree. Can I mention one of this that is very close to my heart?
Okay.
Women participations in politics, for example, or other, let's say, issues.
The president has approved the appointment of 5 new media aides. They include Channels Television's National Assembly correspondent Linda Ekigbe as a senior special assistant to the president on strategic communications. Mrs. Akigbe is to serve as the communications advisor to the president of the ECOWAS Commission, Mr. Omar Toure. The Economic Commission of West African States has also confirmed Mrs. Akigbe's appointment and secondments to the commission. Until her appointment, Mrs. Akigbe was a staff of Channels Television, having joined the station since 2008. Others appointed by the President Bola Tinubu include former presidential candidate and motivational speaker, Mr. Fela Durotoye, as Senior Special Assistant on National Values and Social Justice, newspaper columnist Frederick Nwabufo as Senior Special Assistant on Public Engagement. The others are Aliyu Audu as Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs and Francis Ada Abba as Personal Assistant to the President on Special Duties. In a statement by the presidential spokesman, Ajuri Ngilale, the President urged all the new appointees to uphold the highest standards of decorum and decency in their engagements with members of the public in the discharge of their duties. We're still ahead on the news at 10. Oil prices jump more than 4% as Israel-Hamas conflict enters a third day following the weekend's deadly surprise attack by the militant group. But that's in business news. You join us.
Well, Africa is the focus of leading economic policymakers as they converge on the continent for the second annual meetings of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. It's come in 50 years since a similar meeting on the continent. The key themes for the 7-day event include building economic resilience, securing transformational reforms, and the much-talked-about macroeconomic challenges facing emerging economies. Our business correspondent, Ini John Mekwa, shares some of the meetings of the first day at Marrakesh, Morocco.
The sight and sound from Marrakesh, the city that has come to be known as a luxurious one in Morocco. However, from October the 9th to the 15th, attention and attendance at the IMF World Bank meetings, the second for 2023, claims top spot. Introducing one of the first of the meetings, Africa Inspired, is the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva.
This year is no exception. Being here on the African continent, first time in 50 years, in half a century, we're here, Africa. It was, of course, right that we would look from inspiration coming from the incredible young women of this continent.
Conversations here is on resetting the narrative on Africa and looking ahead to the future that is creative, digital, entrepreneurial, and innovative.
As a continent, we've just been so quiet. The world doesn't know who we are, except for their vision of who they think we are. It's our responsibility to tell the stories, and we have to ensure that we have everything set up to be able to ensure that we can tell those stories.
In technology, for me, I firmly believe it's not a panacea. There are many things we need to do, and I'll challenge those of you who are here from the World Bank and the IFC. Africa needs industrial policy. It cannot leapfrog. No matter AI, all the tech, etc., industrial policy is so critical to digital.
Another meeting on the first day is the G24 deputies meeting. While it was a closed-door meeting, the director and head of secretariat of G24, Mrs. Yabo Masha, lets us in on some of the conversations.
The purpose of the deputies meeting is mainly to agree on the work program and the communique that will be issued by the ministers tomorrow. In the communique, the G24 is calling for quite a few policy changes within the international financial architecture and also within the Bretton Woods institutions. So these issues have to be agreed upon by G24 members because, as you know, our membership is very heterogeneous. We have China, we have India, Brazil, Argentina, we have South Africa, many countries with different interests. So the purpose of a meeting like this is to aggregate the interests and find common grounds so that when we go out there to make demands with the breadth of these institutions, we're speaking with one voice.
Many more meetings and conversations are lined up. However, the focus circles around building a resilient economy, not just for Africa, but the world. Ini John Mekwa, Channels Television News.
Back home, 350 women drawn from villages surrounding the Gashaka-Gumti National Park in Taraba State have been empowered with agro-processing skills by the African Nature Investors Foundation. According to the country director, Mr. Nacha Jeffrey, the initiative is to boost community relationships and protection of the national park. Also speaking at the event, the Taraba State Commissioner for Heritage and Ecotourism, Mr. Titus Nagombe, says that the state government is working hard to ensure the protection and conservation of wildlife in the park for tourists.
Gashaka-Gumti National Park in Taraba State serves as a stronghold for many threatened species of animals. To protect these animals, the African Nature Investors Foundation signed an agreement with the National Park Service to protect and develop the park.
1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2.
Threatened by logging, poaching, illegal settlements, mining and livestock grazing, the foundation has employed means to ensure both the park and surrounding communities are protected.
We embarked on retraining and training of old rangers and new recruits for ranger activities. And then we equipped them with the latest world standard equipment. Having secured the park, we now embarked on patrols to stop the criminal activities going on inside the park.
Outside the park, a sense of camaraderie rents the air as the African Nature Investors Foundation organizes a trade fair where women trained in agro-processing display their wares.
This support is coming into the communities because you have the national park around you. So these are the benefits you are getting because of living alongside the park and wildlife.
Some of the tourists want to come and see elephant. They want to come and see hippos. They want to come and see gorillas. If you get down today, you will not see them, except we preserve them and protect them together in some places.
Machinery to make production easy is commissioned by the State Commissioner for Heritage and Ecotourism and distributed to beneficiaries. The partnership is considered a major step towards youth empowerment.
The partnership came about because of the need to fast-track the development of infrastructure in the national parks.
When you provide means of livelihood for them, train them, incorporate them into the national park by providing employments to their youths. So at least it will go a long way in reducing overdependence on the park resources.
The African Nature Investors Foundation hopes to further focus on ecotourism in the park as they continue to conserve and protect wildlife in the park through mining every area of the park with aerial views included via the purchase of a helicopter in 2022.
Well, let's switch gears now. Business News is next on the news at 10 with Joke Rogers.
Thank you, Kayode. Welcome to Business News. Oil prices rallied by more than 4% today following the weekend surprise attack on Israel by a Palestinian militant group, Hamas, as the conflict between both sides enters a third day. Brent crude, the global commodities price benchmark, jumped 4.2% higher to $88.15 a barrel, while its contemporary, the U.S. West Texas Intermediate, surged 4.34% to $86.38 per barrel, the biggest one-day gain for both benchmarks since the first quarter of this year. While the warring parties are not major oil producers, analysts say the conflict sits at the doorstep of a key oil-producing and export region, with concerns that the conflict could spill into the Middle East. Meanwhile, Nigeria is ready to become a net exporter of petroleum products by 2024, and this is according to the Group Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Mele Kyari. He made this known today at the Energy and Labour Summit held in Abuja and organized by the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengasin. Mr. Kyari gave assurances on Nigeria's readiness to become a net exporter of petroleum products next year, in line with President Bola Tinubu's objectives of delivering immediate benefits of sufficient in-country volumes while creating export revenue. The NNPCL boss also emphasized the need for an inclusive and equitable energy transition strategy. Poorer countries are paying higher interest rates despite borrowing at lower rates, in contrast to richer and developed countries, and that's according to the Secretary-General of the Commonwealth, Patricia Scotland. She made this known today in an exclusive interview with our correspondent, Ini John Mekwa, on the sidelines of the annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank in Marrakesh, Morocco.
Created in the Commonwealth Secretariat a new debt management system called Meridian, which not only seeks to manage the public debt, but also seeks to manage private debt as well. About 40 countries are using that, and 36 of those countries are our Commonwealth countries. So we've got to improve debt transparency. We also have to look at the level of interest that our member states are paying on that debt. The least developed countries are paying 3 times as much in debt interest rates than others, although they borrow half as much. The fact that many of our countries are spending more on debt interest than we are receiving on overseas development aid. So there has to be a recalibration of how that is done. There has to be fairness. We've been talking about climate justice, but we also need to look at debt justice, because you'll know that there's a direct correlation between the level of debt and indebtedness many of our countries have and the level of disasters.
We can get the full interview on our Business Morning program tomorrow at 10 a.m. Nigeria's stock market begins the second week of October on the positive side as investors renew their buying interest in some high-value equities. Laddie Williams has the details.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Reports. While the local bourse is starting the week on a bullish note with an almost 1% gain there, 67,101 points for the all-share index. Market cap sitting at 36.865 trillion naira. Let's look at the activity chart now. We'll see volume there down there 28%, 268 million units of stocks valued at 3.46 billion naira. This is also 61% down compared to Friday, but we have deals in the green, 6,911. Let's look at the gainers counter. We see Boa Cement topping the counter, up 10%. We know Boa did draw first blood in the cement market, crashing ex-factory price to about 3,500 naira for cement. Might be seeing a price war in that market. Let's look at the losers counter now. We see Prestige there, and FTN Cocoa Processors. This was the top gainer last week, but we're seeing some profit taking there, 8.33%. Down, so investors might be taking some profit off the table on this FTN Cocoa Process. Well, market breadth is positive with 26 gainers, with Boa Cement leading the pack, and that's why we have a bullish close. That's it from me on the Stock Market Report. I'm Laddie Williams.
That's Business News Tonight. Back to you, Kayode.
Well, thank you, Chukke. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the country's defense forces' retaliation for the worst attack on Israeli soil in decades has only just begun. Here's Simon Pusa with more on this and other international stories in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Israel's defense minister has ordered a complete siege of the Gaza Strip, including the cutting off of food, fuel, electricity and water supplies. The area is fast turning into one of ruin. Gaza's health ministry says 511 people have been killed and 2,750 injured as a result of Israeli missile strikes on the Gaza Strip since Saturday. Israel says fighter jets, helicopters and artillery struck over 500 Hamas and Islamic Jihad targets in the Gaza Strip overnight and into the morning. In a speech to the nation, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed mighty vengeance against Hamas. It's after the militant group launched thousands of rockets and missiles into Israel on Saturday, killing at least 250 people and wounding around 2,000. On the same day, Hamas fighters entered a music festival in southern Israel, held to coincide with the Jewish festival of Sukkot. People fleeing in panic as gunmen shot indiscriminately. More than 260 bodies have reportedly been recovered from the festival site. Israel also says around 100 people have been kidnapped. Iran's president, whose country funds Hamas, congratulated Palestinians on what he described as a victory. It is a manifestation of resistance and standing up against the fake Zionist regime, he said. The Palestinian people, the Palestinian soldiers, all Palestinian groups, and the Islamic Ummah really should be congratulated on this victory. But no one here is celebrating. As the death toll mounts and the violence intensifies, an all-out protracted war looks even more certain. Well, leaders around the world have condemned the attacks. The US says it is moving an aircraft carrier, ships and jets to the eastern Mediterranean and will also give Israel additional equipment and ammunition, while UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is hosting an emergency meeting amid the ongoing violence.
The scenes that we've seen in Israel over the past 36 hours are truly horrifying. I want to express my absolute solidarity for the people of Israel. Now is not a time for equivocation, and I'm unequivocal. Hamas and the people who support Hamas are fully responsible for this appalling act of terror, for the murder of civilians and for the kidnapping of innocent people, including children. I've just spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu to assure him of the UK's steadfast support as Israel defends itself against these appalling attacks. We will do everything that we can to help. Terrorism will not prevail.
Gunning down Israeli civilians in their towns, in their homes, and as we've seen so graphically, literally dragging people across the border with Gaza, including a Holocaust survivor in a wheelchair, women and children. So you can imagine the impact this is having throughout Israel, and the world should be revolted at what it's seen.
In other news, rescuers are digging for survivors of a powerful earthquake that flattened whole villages in Afghanistan, killing more than 1,000 people. The 6.3 magnitude quake struck on Saturday morning in Herat province, a barren landscape dotted with mud brick homes. Villagers are still using shovels and bare hands to search for the missing, more than 500 people, according to the UN. Aid delayed by blocked routes and communication lines being down only started to trickle in on Monday. The death toll from Sunday's landslide in Cameroon's capital Yaoundé has risen to 30, with 17 others injured. Homes in Mbankolo, an impoverished neighbourhood, were reduced to rubble following heavy rains. There are fears that several people are still trapped under the ruins. And the UK and the Republic of Ireland are set to be announced as the hosts of the 2028 European Championships at a UEFA meeting in Switzerland on Tuesday. The five-nation bid is now running unopposed after Turkey withdrew from the process last week. Turkey managed their Euro 2032 bid with Italy in July and are set to be confirmed as joint hosts for that tournament. Both bids are running unopposed but still need to be officially approved by UEFA. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel's studios in Lagos.
Thanks, Simon. And back here, Nigeria's youngest national chess champion has emerged. 11-year-old Deborah Ebimobo-Ere has won in the women's category at the 2023 Nigerian National Chess Championship to go home with a prize money of 1 million naira. Deborah will join our coach, who interestingly won the men's category for the 4th time with a prize money of 1.5 million naira to represent Nigeria at the African Chess Championship next year. And in football, we're ahead of Friday's Super Eagles international friendly against Saudi Arabia and Portugal. The trial of Chidozie Anweziem, Tron Eboe, and Sadiq Umar have been called up to replace Jamilu Collins, Ola Aina, and Taiwa Waniyi, respectively, owing to injuries. Friday's game at the Estadio Municipal de Portimao is the second ever clash between both countries. The two sides played a goalless draw in a pre-2010 FIFA World Cup friendly game in Austria on the 25th of May 2010. And that's it on Sports News. Kayode is back to you.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey. And the main news again. The Lagos State High Court today sentenced to death by hanging the suspended Assistant Superintendent of Police, Drambi Vandy, for the murder of Lagos-based lawyer Mrs. Omobolanle Rahim in December 2022. And the federal government said it will compel airline operators to start paying compensation to passengers for flight delays or cancellations not attributed to natural occurrences. And Israel's defense minister has ordered a complete siege of the Gaza Strip, including the cutting off of food, fuel, electricity, and water supplies. And that's the news at 10 for tonight, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm Kayode Ohikulu. Good night.